Am I on, Ryan?
Just go.
What do you mean?
Start presenting.
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for the live stream for Q2 2020. And while I want to say, while it says Electric Coin Company on the first slide, really this whole session is about stuff that we've been working on to support you, the community. So what you're going to see is you're going to see some updates from various team members. We're going to see some new programs and hopefully some stuff for you to get excited about. This is the agenda. I won't spend a lot of time here, but it's a preview of what's to come. Remember, if you have questions, please log the questions. So you can go to Slido, enter that event code, ECC Livestream, load up your questions. And then if you see questions that you really like, please vote them up and we will do our best to hit as many as we can at the end of our time. With that, what I'd like to do is introduce Zuko. So he's the ECC CEO. If you're not familiar, he's one of a handful of people that I know professionally that have one word name. Is known by his first name, but Zuko, why don't you kind of introduce us to what's going on in this quarter?
All right, hi there, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a lot of great stuff to show you. I'm not going to steal the thunder or use up the time of everyone else by foreshadowing it too much, but I want to say the general pattern here is that since we last met with you a quarter again, the world has dramatically changed, but our strategy has not. The Zcash strategy is still to continue the growth and evolution of Zcash in order to meet the needs of a growing and evolving world of a growing marketplace. And everything that's happened in the last few months has made me think that more than ever, the time is ripe for a positive alternative for society that respects the dignity of individuals and groups and gives people options and empowers people with new tools. That's what we've always been about. And you're going to see the latest updates from us. And you're going to see the theme for what we've been doing is encouraging and supporting more and more different people and groups and organizations to contribute to the larger picture of Zcash outside of the Electric Coin Company itself. Okay, let's see. Next slide. The main thing, there's lots of good work that different people are going to present later in this call, but the main thing that I want to describe to you is the new dev fund that the community came up with over the course of the last year to replace the expiration of the first 4 years of Zcash. This is, in my opinion, the most important thing about Zcash because it makes Zcash self-funding and self-governing while still being decentralized and like well-governed. What the community came up with is that for the coming 4 years, they're going to be allocating 80% of all the newly issued Zcash coins to the miners. This coincides with Zcash's first halving event, which is coming in November. And once that kicks in, then for the next 4 years, the new consensus rules say that 80% of all the newly issued coins are going to go to the miners. 5% are going to go to the Zcash Foundation, 7% are going to go to the Electric Coin Company, and 8% are going to go to this new entity that I'll describe in a second called the Major Grants Review Committee, MGRC, on this slide. Now, if we were just to assume that the price of Zcash were to stay at around $50 a coin for the next 4 years, then these are already big numbers, like the 8% that's scheduled to go to the Major Grants Review Committee is would be worth $21 million over the next 4 years at that price. But of course, if the price of Zcash coins goes up to $500 a coin, then that's $210 million over the next 4 years. And if it goes up to $5,000 per coin, then that's $2.1 billion over the next 4 years. And so it's potentially, it's already big, even at the current state of affairs, and it's potentially much bigger. And something that's really exciting about what the community came up with is that the largest slice here, the Major Grants Review Committee, is constitutionally excluded from any of it going to the Zcash Foundation or to the Electric Coin Company. It's all targeted to draw in new third parties and support existing third parties that support Zcash. So that's super exciting to me. I think it's a very good move on the part of the community, and it's going to have tremendously good effects over the coming years. The next slide is about the timeline of that. The parts that are all grayed out, you can study. They came from originally from Masari, which is a really good like analysis and news site. And a lot has gone on over the last more than a year in Zcash governance, which is very positive and is deservedly a model to the rest of the industry. But the coming steps are that the very next deadline that you need to be aware of is that people who want to apply, who self-nominate to be a part of the Major Grants Review Committee, need to do so by September 1st. There's already an active ongoing discussion, and a lot of self-nominated candidates have already come forward. So check that out on the forum and join in. And that's all I had to say about that. That's our strategy. Zcash continues to be, in my opinion, uniquely placed to help shape the history of humanity. And in order to fulfill that role, we have to continue on with the complementary strategies of both putting something in people's hands that they can experience being part of a new, better economy and a better society, and also advocating verbally and participating in the discourse with common everyday citizens, journalists, regulators, and everyone about the changes our world's undergoing, and portraying a positive vision of a safe and healthy economy and society that they can get behind. All right, on with the show. Stay tuned for really great stuff.
All right, thank you, Zuko. So before we get into the rest of the presentations, I'm going to cover on-chain numbers really quickly. So numbers, if I can get to the next slide. Numbers are kind of tricky, right? So sometimes they tell the truth, and sometimes they're misleading, and sometimes they tell a fiction. But we wanted to share a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of some of the on-chain transactions over the last few months. So this graph is a total number of transactions by month since Zcash's inception. And the different colors represent different types of transactions. I know it may be difficult to see on your screen, but what's more important is kind of the relative trends. So the one thing to kind of note with that bar across the middle is that outside of a month, Zcash is seeing its highest total transaction volume since July of 2018, which coincided with the crash in the bear market about 2 years ago. And it's about 37% higher than it was during the first 4 months of last year, and on a 5-month upward trend. So sometimes it's assumed that the transaction volume directly correlates to the price of the coin, as there's a lot of speculators. What we're seeing in this case certainly is that we're seeing an upward trend and momentum of the transactions that's really kind of forming independent of the price of the coin. So this one is the total number of transactions that include a shielded component. So that is across both pools, the sprout and the sapling pool. It includes transparent to shielded addresses, shielded to shielded, or transactions, and transparent to shielded. So all types. So fully shielded transactions in the sapling pool have dramatically increased. over the last 2 months. So it was 8.7 thousand transactions in April, which is in the sapling pool, which is the highest ever logged in the sapling pool, by about 3,600. And that's a 70% increase over March, and March itself was 113% increase over February. So I want to note that in March, some of the sapling transaction volume was due to some testing that some members at ECC, I don't want to say it's due to some testing, but were impacted by some testing, certainly. But it doesn't account for the growth that we've seen in the last month. So it's anybody's guess as to why. There's more wallets, there's more things coming out where people are. It's easier to use, to use the wallets for shielded transactions, and so certainly we're encouraged by that growth. And then lastly, this is what this is a total number of shielded transactions, Z to Z transactions, in each of the pools over time, each month building on itself. And so that's really one of the reasons that the shielded number is so interesting, because users get the full benefit of kind of a much bigger privacy set. So in mixing transactions, you have the benefit of a privacy set that's based on the number of transactions that are in that particular mix. With Zcash, you get the aggregate of everything in the pools. So as that grows and grows exponentially over time, it affords users more and more privacy. There's a quick update on the numbers, and now let's get into some other stuff. I want to introduce you to Nathan. Nathan's our CTO, and he and the team have put together a really interesting and I think unique program for Zcashers called the Zcash Developer Alliance. Hopefully you've seen it in some of the press last week, but Nathan's going to talk you through it.
Thanks, Josh. All right, welcome everyone. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the Zcash Developer Alliance. So this is an industry consortium that ECC brought together of a bunch of teams focused on cross-chain interoperability that we're excited to work with. And we gathered these folks together to focus on interoperability between other blockchains and Zcash. So the primary other chains the members are focused on include Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cosmos. Elsewhere in the Zcash ecosystem, the foundation is collaborating with the Cosmos Foundation. And so the work this group does will be complementing that, and we'll be collaborating with them. And generally, this group will be doing all of their development and collaboration in the open, with open source. So there won't be any sort of like closed door secret product launches or anything. So yeah, continuing on. So I wanted to, another thing to point out is that this is just a collaboration focused on building out cross-chain technologies and products. The members all are motivated to be working on that for their own reasons, but we have overlapping goals. And this is independent from like the major grants, the major grants review committee that Zuko is talking about, or Zcash governance or anything of that nature. These teams might show up and participate in some of that stuff, but this is orthogonal to that. So I wanted to describe a little bit about why we value each team being on being part of this ZDA, because I think they each bring different complementary expertise. So I'll start on the left with Agoric. So Agoric, some of the folks in Agoric have been working on object capability security and the predecessor to what we call smart contracts today for many years. before they founded Agoric. So we're really excited about that expertise. Agoric has been working with Cosmos on things like dynamic IBC, and they're also focused on thinking about smart contract composition when you want to interact with multiple chains, which is a kind of a different approach to smart contracting. Usually, most smart contracting systems I'm aware of are sort of assuming you're running on a single chain. That focus is really valuable. And like an example technology they're working on with that perspective would be electronic rights transfer protocol. Rotating clockwise, we get to Bolt Labs. So Bolt Labs is building out a technology called ZK channels. It is similar to Lightning, so it's a layer 2 channel-based protocol, but it has stronger in-band privacy guarantees. And they're targeting both Bitcoin and Zcash. And so we're excited about the potential interaction there with the Bitcoin network. Moving on to Consensus. If you are familiar with Ethereum, you probably know about Consensus. They're a large like incubator and research lab. Consensus and ECC have begun doing collaborative research on using zero-knowledge proving technology focused on scaling. And it turns out that a lot of that technology and those techniques apply both to scaling and cross-chain interoperability. So we're excited about that. Well, I'll skip over ECC because the rest of this is about us and what we're doing. When we get to Occlusion, they're from the Cosmos ecosystem, and they focus on and have experience with deploying infrastructure for staking in Cosmos. And we feel that having that infrastructure focused experience is really important and a boon to this group. Then we move on to Kyber Network. So Kyber Network is a large liquidity aggregator for DeFi on Ethereum, and they help make it easy for end users to exchange between Ethereum assets with good rates. And we wanted them on the team so that we have someone with experience reaching all the way to the end user and giving them a product that they can use like immediately in their wallets to sort of close the loop with, so that we're not just focused on like a back-end protocol piece that users can't see or interact with. And they also have experience helping to design and launch WBTC, which is a wrapped token on Ethereum that's backed by Bitcoin. And finally, we get to Thesis. Thesis is a studio company, and so they have a project called Keep Project, which is working on cross-chain token bridging technologies. And the first one they've launched is TBTC. So we're really excited to have all of these teams showing up and bringing different expertise so that we can collaborate together on cross-chain interop for Zcash. So that's an overview of the teams. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about how at ECC we think about adoption and privacy and cross-chain interoperability. So this image represents the two Zcash shielded pools in the center there. Sorry, the two Zcash pools in the center there. One's shielded and one's transparent. Zcash has transparent and shielded addresses. All funds live in one of those kinds of addresses. And the transparent Zcash is based on the simpler Bitcoin technology. So when we launched Zcash, we used Bitcoin, a fork of the Bitcoin source code, and we reused most of its design, including like the issuance schedule and all of that technology, the crypto, the consensus, and then we added the new zero-knowledge shielded technology to it. And so users can interact with both systems. Most goods and services that integrate with Zcash integrate with the transparent side first because it's easiest because the technology is simpler. But we see here in this image that there's different these different icons represent different goods or services or products that are connected to Zcash, and some of them support interacting with the shielded pool, and some support interacting with transparent Zcash. The important thing about how we think about privacy on Zcash is that users who use the shielded pool gain privacy benefits whether or not they're interacting with services connected to the shielded pool, or even when they're interacting with services connected to the transparent pool. So I want to illustrate that with kind of a story. So imagine we have Alice. Alice is a miner. Oh, let's back up a few slides. So Alice is a miner. Let's say she mines and receives a shielded payout, which is a new feature that will be activated with Heartwood. So that payout goes to her mobile wallet that supports shielded. So that transaction of the payout is fully shielded. Nobody viewing the blockchain can see the sender or recipient address or the amount. They don't know that Alice is doing mining necessarily. They don't know anything about her wallet. So that's extremely strong privacy. That's the kind everyone loves and talks about. But moving on, the next day, Alice, or in the next week, Alice might decide that she wants to deposit some of that Zcash from her shielded mobile wallet into an exchange. And let's say this exchange only supports transparent deposit addresses. So that's what the little icon on the bottom right represents. So she makes a deposit. Now, let's say she's depositing 7 ZEC. The blockchain, anyone observing the blockchain will see the deposit address, which is a transparent address, and 7 ZEC, but they won't see Alice's, her mobile wallet's address. So they won't know anything about that mobile wallet necessarily. So continuing on, the next day, she might decide she wants to transfer some through a cross-chain mechanism that connects to another chain to issue wrapped Zcash tokens. So let's say she's transferring it to Ethereum to participate in DeFi, and she transfers 3 ZEC. So on-chain, the cross-chain mechanism will be visible, and as well as the amount, 3 ZEC. And then anyone observing across chains can see that that 3 ZEC gets wrapped and ends up on Ethereum and enters DeFi. So the really important thing here is that that interaction that's visible, interacting with DeFi, again, doesn't link to Alice's shielded mobile wallet. And importantly, it isn't connected to her activity of depositing on an exchange. So even though the DeFi bridge is transparent, and even though the exchange deposit address is transparent, Alice has this really strong privacy benefit because she's using a shielded mobile wallet, that those two interactions are unlinked. And furthermore, they're completely unlinked to the original mining transaction, which was fully shielded. So the initial focus for ZDA is on bridging technologies, and currently the state of the art for bridging technologies is that they're going to interact with transparent Zcash. Now, moving on in the future, it may be possible to have some better privacy benefits when transferring or interacting across chains, but that's like an open research area. There's a lot of unknowns, and it's a very difficult problem. But so that could be a future goal for ZDA, but currently ZDA is focused on bridging to transparent Zcash, and we believe that that's beneficial for all Zcash users, and also Zcash users who use shielded technology gain privacy benefits even when using these transparent bridges. So that's our thinking with ZDA and why we're focused on what we are with ZDA today. So that's that story. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Nathan. That was great. So we're going to move on to ECC R&D and engineering, and here to lead us through that is Stephen.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Stephen Smith, the Director of Engineering at ECC, and I'm very excited to be here again and look forward to walking you through our flight plan. We presented our first flight plan in the November 2019 live stream. Last quarter, I provided a mid-horizon update to that plan, and today I'm providing you an updated flight plan that reflects time horizons starting at the beginning of the current quarter. From an engineering perspective, we define 3 different time horizons: 0 to 6 month period, 6 month to 2 year period, and a 2 year to 4 year period. Just a few notes before we get started. Like any product plan, the further out we go, the less well-defined the plans are and the more likely they are to change. And while we talk about horizons out as far out as 4 years, the activities we're talking about are just those done in the current quarter. It's also worth noting the activities that we list in support of each goal may be completed in the current quarter, or they may span multiple quarters depending on the size and scope of the activity. Okay, so with that, we'll just jump right in. Okay. So Horizon 1 is focused on community enablement and interop, and we have several activities in the quarter in support of these goals. First up is Flyclient support. Flyclient primarily does a couple of things. One, it enables low-power devices, for example, mobile phones, to send and verify transactions. And 2, it facilitates cross-chain interop protocols. We've actually already completed the support for Flyclient this quarter, wrapping up the implementation and the associated implementation audit, and released the support in release 2.1.2. It's available on testnet now and will be available on mainnet when Heartwood activates mid-July. You'll hear more about Flyclient support in a few minutes from Strad. Next, we have our shielded Coinbase implementation. Currently in Zcash, Coinbase transactions can only contain transparent outputs, meaning the block rewards can only go to transparent addresses. Shielded Coinbase eliminates that requirement and incentivizes miners to shield directly into the sapling pool. Like Flyclient, we've already completed the support, wrapping up the implementation, the associated audit, and released the support also in release 2.1.2. It's available on testnet and will be available on mainnet when Heartwood activates mid-July. Next is viewing key RPC support. Viewing keys essentially allow users to selectively disclose transaction information to third parties. There are multiple use cases for this feature, but 2 of the main ones are regulatory and audit compliance. Support for full viewing keys was added to Zcash in release 2.1.2 also and is available for use now. You will hear more about viewing keys in a few minutes from Dodger. Continuing on with Horizon 1, our Testnet in a Box initiative facilitates testing by protocol development teams by allowing them to spin up their own multi-node testnets, and we'll deliver this feature this quarter. This is really incredibly important as we look to work with more and more protocol development teams in the future, as it allows them to spin up a working testnet and others to join that testnet, assuming consensus compatibility to participate in extended testing. This implementation is ready, and we'll be working with Bolt Labs on the first pilot as we roll out TZEs in support of their ZK Channels protocol. ZK Channels, as Nathan mentioned, is a way to achieve private payments off-chain. Transparent Zcash extensions is the mechanism that supports those private payments, but it's essentially payment channels and simplifies extensibility of consensus rules for other use cases, such as atomic swaps with other blockchains. We're also continuing to do a lot of work this quarter on our wallet SDKs for iOS and Android, and our Android and iOS wallet apps. We previewed the apps in the last live stream, and we'll be open sourcing the code later this quarter. Okay, moving on to Horizon 2, which is under a new governance structure. It covers the 6 month to 2 year time frame. And of course, that's, during the time period is the advent of the dev fund. So the first activity there is to implement the dev fund decision into consensus rules for NU4. We've already finalized feature selection for NU4. There are some things in there in addition to the dev fund zips. You can go to our website. We have a blog entry about it that covers everything we're including. The primary activity for this quarter will be finalizing the zip specifications, the specification audits, and completing the bulk of the implementation work. Okay, so next up, we have a couple of very exciting research efforts that we've spoken about in the past, making progress on both. The first one is Halo 2. The goal of Halo 2 is to scientifically advance and productionize Halo zero-knowledge proofs as a standard for recursive proof composition. Halo enables recursive proof composition even without a trusted setup. That addresses scaling challenges by allowing massive amounts of computation to be checked in a short proof, and the proof can be created by many uncooperative parties acting individually. Our activities this quarter, in addition to continued research, is to make the Halo implementation public and update the ePrint to reflect that implementation. Next is Scalability 2021, which is a long-term initiative to transition to a new architecture with layer 1 horizontal scalability. We'll be documenting our progress on this initiative this quarter in a public document for feedback and comments. Okay, continuing Horizon 2. The next goal, and this is a lot of what Nathan was talking about and several initiatives at ECC, including the Zcash Developer Alliance, Zcash Gardening Club. But the next goal is to begin the transition to community-driven development, which really begins in earnest with the advent of major grants in the Dev Fund era. We've learned a lot about the network upgrade process through each upgrade and look forward to working with everyone involved to make it a more agile process while still retaining the safeguards that have provided several successful upgrades throughout the years. We're also starting a project to enhance the Zcash documentation, which will be paramount as we begin to onboard more and more community members and development teams into the ecosystem. Now, we've actually got a pretty excellent set, a doc set at the moment, but we're looking for ways to make it even better and easier to get started with Zcash development. So that's essentially what that project is. Okay, moving on to layer 3, which is the 2-year to 4-year timeframe. Again, the focus, at this point, it's where a lot of our research efforts pay off. The focus is on layer 1 scalability and a closed loop with regard to the shielded lifecycle. This is where we'll see the deployments of things like Halo and our Scalability 2021 initiative. And it's worth noting here that while we've slotted this time frame out at 2 to 4 years, some components of both Halo 2 and our Scalability initiative may actually deploy prior to that, depending on the architectural latitude that we have with those solutions. So it may be prior to 2 years, within maybe the 18-month time frame or so. But again, first activity, Halo 2 deployment. Again, the overall goal is to make Halo accessible to the wider proof ecosystem as a standard for recursive composition. Second activity is the deployment of our Scalability 2021 initiative. Ideally, you always address scalability before it becomes a concern. In complicated systems and networks, the intricacies of scalability are often complicated and there's really no quick fix. So if you have a scalability problem, the solution may take you way too long to actually implement. But by beginning work now on this long-term initiative, we ensure we're ready to deploy well ahead of demand, which increases confidence in the platform. And we want Zcash users to feel confident in their decision to use it, both at a consumer and business level. And the next activity is focused on extending privacy across various bridging protocols, creating that privacy network effect. This makes Zcash more valuable to DeFi applications and other blockchains. And activity this quarter is continued early R&D for shielded Zcash extensions. Okay, so some upcoming important Heartwood, which is NU3 and NU4 events. The first one is we are currently on May 25th, we'll be selecting a code name for NU4. So you can head on over to the forum right now and vote on your favorite choice. Late May, we'll be putting out release 3.00, which sets the mainnet activation height for Heartwood. Early July, release 3.10, which will set the testnet activation height for NU4. Mid-July, Heartwood will activate on mainnet. End of July, NU4 will activate on testnet. Mid-August, release 4.00 will set the mainnet activation height for NU4. End of September, release 4.10 comes out, and then mid-November, NU4 will activate on mainnet. So that covers everything that I wanted to go over. Next up, Strad is going to talk in more detail about our Flyclient support. So with that, I'll pass it over to him.
Thanks, Stephen. Adoption and usability are crucial to the success of Zcash, and there are use cases where running a full node with a complete history of the Zcash changes simply isn't feasible, such as low-powered devices like payment terminals. Like clients running in these environments need to rely on external sources of information for details such as incoming payments or their transactions being confirmed. Flyclient enables these devices to send and receive transactions more safely by providing a mechanism for verifying the information from these external sources. It is also useful in the cross-chain protocols, as being discussed earlier, where instead of having a low-powered device, you have an entirely separate chain that wants to verify Zcash transactions. And in the future, with some updates to the Flyclient zip, it could also be useful to and beneficial to new full nodes by enabling them to fast sync and start from the current chain state, more like a light client, while fetching and verifying the full chain history in the background. So what is Flyclient and how does it help us with these goals? First, a quick recap. In a blockchain like Zcash, each block of transactions has a proof that some amount of computational work was performed to create the block. The difficulty of this work is adjusted by the network after every block to maintain a predictable block creation rate. Full nodes download all of these blocks and verify all the proofs of work along with the transactions in each block to ensure that the chain is valid. At any point, they can show you a block that is the current tip of a valid chain that has the most work. Now, if you are a light client being given that single block, how do you determine that it is indeed part of the valid chain? Well, the simplest approach is just to verify the proofs of work yourself for the entire chain all the way back to the Genesis block. This is the SPV approach from Bitcoin, where if you assume that the majority of full nodes are correctly verifying transactions, then you can use the valid proofs of work as evidence that the chain is valid. Now, this doesn't require the full chain history, but it does require data linear in the length of the chain because you need all the block headers. And you have to verify every proof of work, which is, again, computational effort that grows as the chain grows. Now, it turns out that we can improve on this by not verifying every proof of work. There is a class of schemes known as non-interactive proofs of proof of work. Next slide. Where you only need to verify that you only need to verify the proofs of work for a small subset of past blocks. Earlier schemes, initial schemes in this operated under particularly specific constraints and assumptions, such as requiring that the difficulty remain constant. And as I mentioned before, that's not the case for Zcash. And you still have this data problem where you need to have all the block headers for the full chain to be able to check that your random blocks are actually part of the chain, because a block only points to its parent. For addressing that, we can use fall back to the computer scientist maxim of if something is linear and you want a log, you need a tree. And that is indeed what Flyclient uses. So we take the blockchain and we create a summary leaf for each block that contains its hash and metadata such as the height, time, difficulty, and number of sapling shielded transactions in the block. We can put pretty much whatever we want in there. We then create a tree from these leaves, which gives us a single root value that commits to the entire blockchain and lets us create short proofs, logarithmic size proofs, that any block exists within that chain. By using what's known as a Merkle mountain range tree structure, it also means that updates to this tree of the sort that are common to blockchains, like add a single block, can be done efficiently. Furthermore, the nodes within the tree, these orange nodes here, commit to the range of values, like the difficulty in the tree below them. This enables light clients to, for instance, verify that updates to the difficulty over time were computed correctly. Finally, once we've gone through the process of verifying some random blocks, checking they're all together, and being satisfied that we have a valid chain, we now only need to store that single root and associated block header locally. Then, when our external source that we're getting information from gives us a transaction that they claim we received, it can also provide a short proof that the transaction exists within that chain we had validated, which gives us the properties that we were looking for. So in the Heartwood upgrade, what we are deploying are the consensus changes that are necessary for light clients to use these Flyclient history trees. Full nodes will build history trees alongside their processing of the main chain. In particular, they will be building a separate tree for each epoch, which is the period between two network upgrades. This enables us to alter the structure of the history trees at each network upgrade if we want to, for instance, to enable this full node fast syncing functionality. The full nodes will then be enforcing that each block header contains the root of the current tree at that point, which ensures that the history trees are correctly bound to the proof of work, and then that the light clients can rely on them. For miners, you'll want to note that the root will replace the hash final sapling root field in the block header. Zcashd will, if you're using the get block template API, Zcashd will handle that for you. And yeah, once that deploys, people will be able to start using these. So if you're interested in using Flyclient for your particular application, come talk to us and we can help get you started.
Thank you, Strad. That was awesome. So another feature that we're really excited to introduce with Heartwood is viewing keys. And with that, I'll introduce our head of regulatory affairs, the Artful Dodger.
Thanks, Josh. So yeah, as was mentioned, viewing keys or support for viewing keys was added in version 2.1.2, and as we're all aware, the key functionality that differentiates Zcash from any other cryptocurrencies is that it includes the ability to create shielded transactions. And this is a representation of a series of shielded transactions where the transaction details are hidden. And what viewing keys allow you to do is get a view for a third party into the details of the transaction. So normally, only the participants to a transaction, the sender and the recipient, get to see the details. But what the owner of an address can do is they can generate a viewing key and share it with a third party to allow them to see the same information that the owner of that address can see. So here's an example where the owner of the first address there on the left has created a viewing key and shared it with us. And we get to see that they recently received a transaction for 0.14 Zcash coins. And they don't get to see who sent it because that information isn't exposed to them. But they do get to see that in the memo field, there was a message that suggests it was in payment for some donuts. If we look at the next viewing key representation, this is for another address. We see here some more transactions. So they've received 3 transactions and they've sent 1 transaction. They've received transactions relating to an invoice, some event supplies for real world crypto, and then there's a transaction down at the bottom where there's nothing in the memo field. And then second from the bottom is a transaction that they've sent. So there we can see that it's their address that sent this transaction. We see who the recipient is. We see the amount, and we see that this is actually a little love note saying I love you. And then the person who received that transaction will get the message I love you, but they again don't necessarily get to see who sent that transaction to them or who sent that message to them. So viewing keys really are a way of allowing someone else to see the same information, the same transaction information that the owner of an address sees. Now, this has a number of use cases. It allows exchanges to support shielded deposits and to be able to detect when a deposit has been received at a shielded address, whilst keeping the spending keys for that address secure using, for example, a hardware security module. It also allows exchanges and custodians or other parties who need to have third-party auditing of their Zcash holdings to hold those coins in a shielded address and to provide a third-party auditor with the viewing keys to verify how many coins they're holding and what the transactions in and out were. And there are other use cases for Zcash, for example, ZPages and Zbay, which we expect will also be able to make use of viewing keys to enhance the functionality that they've built on top of the Zcash blockchain. A couple of things to be aware of with shielded transactions. They allow all of the activity associated with an address to be viewed by the third party. So all of the past transactions and going forward, all of the future transactions received at or sent from that address can be seen with that viewing key. There is some other functionality that we plan to expose in the future called payment disclosure that will allow you to share information about a single atomic transaction, but that's further down the line. It's on the product backlog. But for now, we think viewing keys represent an important step forward. They unlock or remove an obstacle to exchanges that want to support shielded addresses for shielded deposits and shielded withdrawals. And we also think that it's going to help regulators get more comfortable with the idea that a regulated entity will be able to support a cryptocurrency like Zcash with very strong privacy preserving qualities, while at the same time being able to fulfill their regulatory obligations, like having third-party independent audits and being able to share information with the regulator where necessary. So that's viewing keys, and now I'll hand you back to Josh.
Thanks, Dodger. So the next thing we're going to share is one of the things that we're working on is like, how do we get more and more of this technology in your hands as developers, and even not just the existing Zcash community, but the broader community developers within this industry. And so I'm going to introduce now Elena and Brad, who are going to take you through an announcement, a program that we have coming up soon.
Thanks, Josh. Dodger is a tough act to follow, especially talking about donuts and viewing keys, but we'll do our best. So as Josh mentioned, ECC is participating in Gitcoin's Protect Privacy Hackathon this quarter. And this initiative is, I think, something everybody at Electric Coin Company is really jazzed about. We're going to be all hands on deck for this event. And one of the main reasons for it is because we're committed to making Zcash a friendly and accessible community for developers of all skill levels and all backgrounds to work on. Hackathons like this are a great way to connect with developers all around the world. So it's something that we're excited about. We're inviting developer teams to compete for $6,000 worth of bounty prizes. And the way that they can win those prizes is by building applications that leverage shielded Zcash. So submissions, they should be creative, they should add value to the Zcash ecosystem, and they should leverage shielded transactions or viewing keys or something related to the shielded properties of Zcash. If you, they can use existing libraries. Brad will talk about those in just a little bit, but they can also, use shielded addresses in completely new ways, maybe ways we haven't even thought about. If you want some exciting ideas, these are ideas that we've been kicking around. You could go the very traditional route, just add shielded support to one of your favorite existing wallets or tools. You could also play with a messaging application that uses shielded addresses or the shielded memo field, like the one Dodger talked about in the viewing key example. One of my favorites, one of the ones that I would be looking forward to, is a shielded merch store where you can buy or sell Zcash swag. Or you might even have a fun idea for a game or some sort of interactive, playful tool that people could use with shielded Zcash. Whatever concept you have, we encourage developer teams around the world to have fun, get creative, and ask plenty of questions along the way. And now I'll talk about the prizes. So as I mentioned, there's $6,000 worth of ZEC bounties. The main bounty is for submissions or applications that leverage shielded Zcash. The grand prize for this bounty is $2,000. And we also have runner-up prizes. So we'll have 2 runner-up prizes for $500 and additional prizes for different categories. So we'll have a most creative category, community choice, and also best submission from a rookie team. The top 15 entrants who do not win a prize will be given a consolation prize of $50. And we're doing this because we really want submissions from people of all different skill levels. We want this to be an inclusive hackathon and an opportunity for people to dip their toe in the shielded pool, so to speak. If teamwork is not your thing, or if you don't want to build a full-on application, we also have opportunities for you to win bounty prizes as well. There'll be general bounties for things like bug fixes, documentation, and code cleanup, and there'll be prize money associated with that as well. Now, we wouldn't put this all out there without giving you the resources and tools that you need to succeed. Brad specifically and his team have put in so many resources or so much attention to building tools for you all during this hackathon. So I'll hand it over to Brad so he can tell you about those resources.
Great, thanks, Elena. So, the wallet team, we're extremely excited about this. We've been working on this for months now to build up to bringing this to the community here in the next few weeks. And we want to provide as much as we can to the overall community, both the technically very sophisticated and just the enthusiasts that maybe don't have those technical skills. And so these are some of the things that we're doing to really bring it to the community. So the wallet team is going to be fully focused on this hackathon for the entire 2 weeks. This is going to be our sole goal. We're going to do a wallet team kickoff that's open to the community with code walkthroughs to really walk you through our wallet SDKs, our light wallet decode, and really start setting that foundation so that anybody can come participate at any level. We're going to be doing daily office hours for the entire 2 weeks. So teams that have questions, they can come in, they can talk to us, they can ask us questions and interact with us on a real-time basis. Elena mentioned we're going to have some of these bounties that aren't necessarily related to teams. We want the community to come and start contributing back to these libraries that we've kickstarted. So we're going to set these bounties up. So when you're submitting PRs back to us, back to our GitHub repos, you get some ZEC for it, which is pretty cool. And then one of the things I'm really excited about, we're obviously excluding ourselves from prizes or bounties or anything like that, but we're actually going to, as a team, build a project alongside everybody else. And we want this project that we're building to be completely open. Meaning if you want to come brainstorm with us, jump onto a code pairing session with us or something like that, you're totally welcome to come in and join and watch us build this thing that we're going to present at the end of the hackathon, just as something interesting that the team was able to make. In addition to support from the SDKs and Light Wallet D, we also have another announcement that will precede the hackathon, which is on June 10th, we'll be open sourcing fully functional iOS and Android mobile wallet code into GitHub. So anyone will be able to go in, build this code, deploy it onto their mobile device, and have a fully functional shielded Zcash wallet. This has been a lot of work. This has been 18 months in the making. We're really proud of the product, and we're hoping you all are excited to see it. So, with that, my call to action for you all is no matter what level you're at, no matter, your interest level, how many years you have in the Zcash community or days, come work with us and see how really inclusive we are and build alongside of us. We're really excited about it. So with that, I'll toss it back to Josh and hope to see you all at the hackathon.
Brad and Elena, awesome. I know a lot of people have been waiting for this, for the code for a long time. And not only is the code coming, but you have the opportunity to work alongside the team, and you're going to win some prizes in doing it and doing so. It's an amazing opportunity. I hope you come and participate and engage, again, whatever level that you're at. And to that point, what I want to do is I want to summarize the session before we go into Q&A. Again, we have been busting tail to really make as much accessible to you as a community as possible, regardless of where you sit, whether you're a developer or you're not a developer, whether you're just kind of interested in kicking the tires and kind of understanding what this is all about, or you're ready to dedicate your own career. So we've got these different levels that you can engage in. If you just want to do crypto and you don't care, we don't have a lot for you, to be honest. There's all kinds of folks that just kind of do crypto and kick things around, and they're in it to go to the moon. But if you're really interested in learning more about Zcash, we have a series of resources. So we've got social media channels. We've got Twitter is a great place to kind of get information that we push things. Even if you use Blockfolio, we publish information out through Blockfolio, so you can sign up for alerts on that as well in case the Twitter feed gets too much. Go to Z.Cash, there's all kinds of good resources in there. We've got a newsletter. So we have been doing newsletters quarterly. We're going to start doing them monthly. And if you didn't know that it exists, you can come to our site at the bottom, at the footer, you can sign up for the newsletter, and then we'll summarize all that stuff that's going on for you, and we'll get it out to you now once a month. If you didn't know that we have a YouTube channel, you're here watching this, so hopefully you do. But there's a lot of other videos, and we've got I don't know, dozens of them out there already, but we're going to continue to expand that library, and then the blog, and make sure that that you're able to kind of catch up there. The next level is engagement. So it's great if you want to be passive and get that information, but there's a number of programs that allow you to be kind of interactive with the rest of the community and with us. So one is Zeal calls that we have monthly that Elena hosts, and we announce those, so watch for those announcements. We have various events that we participate in, and we're kind of having to rethink about how those events work in a post-COVID world. The next one that we have is a digital event called Mainnet, June 1 to 3, that's put on by Masari. And we have a couple sessions. We'll give an update on the project there, but also we're going to have a pretty unique panel with Peter Van Belkenberg, who's on the board of the Zcash Foundation, with our own Zuko, and with Mario, who works at Placeholder. And they're going to talk about the governance process and what it was like over this last year and what's upcoming, and the good and the bad and the struggles, and have that conversation in a public forum. So hopefully you'll be able to join that. Also, we've got a forum that really the Zcash Foundation manages. There's a Discord group that Mine Zcash manages. There's a Telegram group that a number of other people in the community manage, but there's different ways to get engaged with other people in the Zcash ecosystem. If you're a builder and a creator, there's other programs for you also. If you have not been, Stephen talked about the documentation that we have. We have a reputation, which I think is phenomenal, for extremely well-documented code. So if you're getting into the code, it's well documented. But a great place to start is actually this place called z.cash readthedocs.io. And I think there's actually even another shortcut to that. But the documentation in there's a section called Developers Contributors. If you're interested in participating as a developer on top of Zcash and the core protocol, go there. Read that documentation. It will give you all you need to get up to speed, and join us in the development of the protocol. There's also, I think Elena mentioned that we have a gardening club. It's the first Tuesday of every month. So that's for open source developers to come together. There's more information in the forum on the gardening club, but it's a way to collaborate. And then finally, we're going to be doing something new on the website. If you're not a developer, or if you're a developer, but it's called ECC Perspectives. And if you have a perspective, whether it's in the context that you live and work in the community that you're in, if it's related to technology, if it's related to privacy, economic freedom, and you're interested in kind of expressing that voice, contact us. We'll have this guest area on the forum, and the first one will be out there here in a couple weeks, that we're excited to get that launched. And then finally, the Uber level is to expand Zcash, is to take Zcash beyond the protocol itself. And you heard a lot about that stuff on this call. One was the major grants with millions of dollars becoming available at the end of this year to continue to build on top of and expand Zcash. The Zcash Developer Alliance that Nathan talked you to, that's an invite-only group. But if you've got an interesting project and you think you can add value, contact us. We'll be expanding that group over time as it makes sense. There's some other stuff that we're going to announce later that I'm not going to talk about now, but there's some other stuff that's coming that's super fun. The hackathon you heard about, the wallet stuff you heard about. So again, wherever you're at, developer, non-developer, just learning or really deep, come join us and as we push this out to the world and develop Zcash together. So with that, I will close and we'll move to questions. And hopefully I'm looking to see kind of questions we have out there from you folks. All right, so the first question came in, it's for Dodger. Dodger, the question is loaded. It's why does Zcash care about regulators?
It's loaded, but it's a great question.
It is a great question.
Yeah. So regulators are a fact of life. They're like gravity. We don't get to escape them. And many people, would say or claim or speculate that coins that preserve privacy are aimed at criminals. They're aimed at people who want to avoid surveillance. They want to engage in some sort of illicit activity. And that's not the case. Zcash is not for criminals. Zcash is for everyone. And everyone needs privacy. And in order to get Zcash into the hands of everyone who needs it, we need to make sure that regulators are comfortable with it. Because if so if we use the United States as an example, if the financial regulators in the United States are not comfortable with an asset like Zcash being traded on a virtual currency exchange, then it won't be listed on Coinbase. It won't be listed on Gemini. It won't be listed on Poloniex. It won't be listed on exchanges where you can buy Zcash in exchange for dollars. So the reason that we care about regulators is because the availability of Zcash for normal people, the people who really need it, is impacted by the regulatory attitude towards Zcash. And we believe that good regulation stems from well-educated, well-informed regulators and policymakers. And that's why that's a large part of what my role is. But we also think that it's important to make it easy for users of Zcash to be compliant with the regulations. We don't believe there's any point in making it difficult to be compliant, because that then just makes it difficult for exchanges to support it, and that makes it difficult for users to buy it. So we've included features in Zcash. Right from the get-go, we've had the encrypted memo field, which was explicitly intended to support a regulatory requirement called the travel rule. And ironically, last year, FATF and the United States, said, right, we're going to start applying the travel rule to cryptocurrency transactions. And this is a rule that requires that information about the sender and the recipient of a funds transfer travel along with the transaction. So if you're sending coins, in theory, if you're sending coins from Coinbase to Gemini, then Coinbase should inform Gemini of who that transaction came from and who it's intended to go to at Gemini. Now, the implementation of that is taking time. The industry is getting to grips with it because very, very few cryptocurrencies are designed to support that requirement. Zcash is the one exception. And that's an interesting story to tell regulators. So I kind of rambled a bit there, but the answer to the question is that we care about regulators because in order for people to be able to gain access to Zcash, to be able to trade it, to buy it, to sell it, regulators need to be comfortable with it. And if they're not comfortable with it, they're going to start creating obstacles. They're going to start being disapproving of it. So that's why we care about regulators. We don't necessarily, support every single regulation that's out there and all the hundreds of jurisdictions that's around the world. There are some common requirements, for example, the ability to audit, exchange holdings or whatnot, that I think we all agree after Mt. Gox make a lot of sense. So that's why we care about regulators.
Thank you. Okay, the next question came in. This one is, how has the pandemic impacted ECC? Which is another good and interesting question. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to DC, who's the COO of ECC.
Great, thanks, Josh, and good afternoon, everyone. So the ECC was fortunate going into COVID-19 that we were already heavily decentralized and distributed physically. So we have an engineering office in Denver, but the majority of our people are spread out, not just across the US, but across the world. So while the rest of the world was figuring out how to use Hangouts and Zoom, we're on those platforms each and every day. We're very comfortable communicating over Hangouts, over video, and over chat. And we're effective that way. But I think we were very much impacted by the pandemic because of the effects that it has on us as human beings and psychologically. So those of us with children found ourselves trying to work and teach school at the same time, which is a position I think none of us thought we were going to be in a couple months back. Those of us with aging parents found that it was really difficult to keep them safe and keep them sane as this thing unfolded. And I think everybody has suffered from having their routine broken up. I think a lot of folks have suffered from having family and friends that have lost their jobs. The economic hardship that not just the US, but the rest of the world is suffering as a part of this outbreak is significant. And I think that raises stress, it raises tension, it makes people be shorter tempered. And so that's something that we've had to learn to live with just like everybody else. But I think watching the central bankers of the world pour money into the system and watching normal people start to realize, Jerome Powell was on 60 Minutes last night being questioned about how the government prints money. I think a lot of people that don't work in this space, that's a new concept to them, that the government and central banks, governments around the world can just inject new money into the system. So I think that's caused a lot of folks to have interest in sound money or fixed supply store value assets like Bitcoin, like Zcash, and others. So I think in summary, it hasn't been easy for us, but I think it's been easier for us at the ECC than it has been for folks that work in service industries, folks at Uber, Lyft, and other like restaurant businesses have just been decimated. And I very much look forward to see how cryptocurrency can be part of helping small business recover from this pandemic.
Thanks, TC. There's a question that came in around another question related to Gitcoin. There's a forum post out there about a crowdfunding campaign on the forum. So two different things, but Nathan, do you want to talk us about the forum post?
Sure. Yeah. So the forum post is not it's not an ECC project. It's not an official ECC thing, but it is a thing I was excited about, and DC and a few other ECC folks. So Kevin Owaki showed up and proposed to the community that it would be good to run some experimental pilots of the Gitcoin approach to crowdfunding. And I'm super excited about running those experiments and learning from them and seeing what that might bring to Zcash. Because in my personal opinion, so far funding in Zcash has been sort of managed by ECC and the foundation in kind of a top-down fashion, which makes sense given their the kinds of organizations they are and their approach. But I feel like we've been missing more of a crowdfunding aspect in Zcash, and so I really wanted to see this experiment go. So I just advocated for people to chip into that. So separately, ECC is collaborating on Gitcoin's hackathon, and that's what Elena and Josh were talking about. And those are separate things, and like ECC employees don't need to care about or pay attention to the quadratic funding thing. It's just a volunteer effort on my part and a few others.
But to that point, we're going to amplify some of that. So we would love for the community to get involved and to take a look at Kevin's post, and like if you can participate, great.
Sure.
We think it's a kind of an interesting funding mechanism.
Yeah, I'm really excited. If you're curious or interested, please go check it out. And there's no obligation to participate. Some people don't think it's a good idea because for a variety of reasons, but I think doing experiments and learning is almost always a good idea.
Hey, Nathan, I have another question that came in for you.
Yep.
Where do you realistically see the usage of Z addresses versus T addresses by the end of 2021? 5%, 10%, more?
Okay, so I expect usage of both to grow. So this question's a little funny because I think that like the percentage, the ratio of numbers of transactions which are shielded or not, I don't think that's a useful thing to pay attention to, and I'll explain why. So, for example, the privacy benefits of shielded usage come from shielded usage. So if there's more shielded transactions as like an absolute number or a rate over time, that's good for privacy. And it doesn't matter if there's more or fewer transparent addresses in that same time. So there's a bunch of different scenarios that we could play out. So one that seems realistic to me would be T-address adoption grows. Let's say it grows by 15%, and shielded adoption grows. Let's say it grows by 10%. So the ratio of shielded to transparent is going down, but the network effects and the privacy benefits of shielded are going up. And so I think that would be a great thing to see. And I actually kind of expect something like that because it's easier to integrate to transparent Zcash for most use cases first. So we might expect that usage to grow at a faster rate. Now, I think in the long run, we can successfully have shielded usage leapfrog transparent usage. So that's what I would like to see. So we know that's happening when a new product or good or service comes to integrate Zcash, and it's easier for them, or they prefer to integrate the shielded Zcash support right off the bat. When we get to that state, then I think we'll leapfrog, and we should definitely aim for that.
Thank you. There's a bunch of questions. I'm going to take maybe one or two more, and then we're going to take the rest to the forum. So we'll make sure to answer your questions, but we may do it there for the sake of time. The next question that came in is, what's the status of access to Japanese exchanges? So this really ties into what Dodger was talking about with the importance of engaging with regulators. So there was some guidance that was issued in 2018 after CoinCheck hack, where pressure was effectively, through that guidance, pressure was applied to exchanges, and exchanges delisted Zcash along with some others in Japan. All exchanges went under something called process improvement orders, where they needed to improve their controls within the exchanges. So we have been engaged directly, face to face, with regulators in Japan to better kind of understand their concerns. Some of those conversations resulted in some research that we recently commissioned and released with the RAND report. If you didn't see that, you can check that out on our blog. Because regulators really wanted to understand how Zcash is being used. The assumption, based upon some misinformation that was out there in the market previously, was that because Zcash preserves privacy, it must be used by criminals. And as Dodger stated, really, Zcash is for everybody, and it's important for everybody that we have privacy protections. And so we commissioned that study, and although Zcash is a top 10 coin in terms of volume and use, it's not being used in any material way within dark markets. So we've had those kinds of conversations, and that was a precursor. That lays a foundation for other conversations with regulators. And the exchanges need to know that they have a regulatory kind of baseline, because it's very expensive to list a coin in Japan. You have to submit an application that's like 70 to 100 pages long. It needs to include all kinds of research. You have to have certain controls within the exchange. And it's very uncertain, both with what's called an SRO, JBCA, as well as the primary regulator, JFSA, like whether or not they'll approve the listing. Now, I'm very positive that we're making good progress with exchanges and regulators in Japan, but it takes time, and we can't rush it, and we can't pressure them. It's on their timetable. And so we're doing everything that we can to be able to support those ongoing conversations. And I can't wait till the day where I can come back to this community and say, we got it done, and Zcash is now available to Japanese citizens on exchanges there. So that's kind of the update with that one. We'll take one more. There's a question on what's going into NU4. And Stephen, if you want to take that question, and then again, we'll take the rest of the forum.
Sure, I'll be glad to. The best source of info is a recent blog post at electriccoin.co where we highlighted kind of the NU4 feature selection process. So I'd encourage you to go there and read through that. Let us know if you have any questions. But in short, it's essentially the implementation of the zips related to the dev fund, and then a few other zips that we evaluated for inclusion that we deemed low risk and compatible with the dev fund zips. So it didn't put any of that upgrade in jeopardy. But that would be the definitive source for that information at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So with that, what I'm going to do is I want to turn it back over to Zuko, who has a few parting words and is going to close us off for this live stream. Zuko.
Hey folks, thanks for joining us. So the big theme is the spread and decentralization of Zcash. And so I want to give a few shout outs. The Flyclient work that we described in detail, that Strad described, is based on a scientific discovery from Benedict Boons and Luciana Kiffer, and a lot of other people that contributed lots of different pieces of the science that goes into that. I want to give a shout out to Henry DeValence at the Zcash Foundation, who's pioneering that question that Nathan alluded to about how to make cross-chain interop connect directly to the shielded pool. And in general, the volunteer Gitcoin quadratic funding experiment, the hackathon that we're about to launch, and then over the coming years, the tens of millions or more of dollars that are going to go into MGRC. That's all stuff that is coming from the community, is coming from Zcash Foundation and others. And thank you for listening to this, and tune in next time. Thanks, everyone.